Welcome to the Heroes of Freedom Rally. Now, those of you who in competition with the first day of hunting season, the first game of the World Series, and the Boise State-Weber State game who have shown up tonight to stand up for freedom here in Idaho, you deserve a hand. Let's give another one. Thank you for showing up tonight, ladies and gentlemen, to stand up for something that is important to the future of our state, freedom of choice, and the ability for our children to grow up in a state where they can find work and be judged on their ability to do that work, not based on whether or not they will join and financially support a particular private association. Tonight, we're going to be hearing from some individuals, both from Idaho, from here within our own country, and even one from as far away as Poland, to speak to us tonight about freedom. And sometimes we in America take freedom for granted. And I want to thank you for showing that freedom is not taken for granted in Idaho, that we're willing to stand up and fight for something that we believe in. Ladies and gentlemen, our MC tonight is an 11-year veteran of radio news, from KFXD Boise to KLCI Nampa to his current position with KLIX Radio in Twin Falls. He's also an avowed Democrat and former union activist. He directed the AFL-CIO's voter registration drive at one time, was a member of Democratic United States Senator Scoop Jackson's staff, a delegate to the 1972 Democratic National Convention, one of 3 finalists last year for Ada County Democratic Party chairman, and press secretary for the 1984 United States Senate campaign for the late Pete Bush, Democrat of Lewiston. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our MC for tonight, whose enthusiastic support here tonight proves that support for freedom and right to work in Idaho comes from all Idahoans, Republican and Democrat alike. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Doug McConaughey.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of you for coming out to the Heroes of Freedom rally this evening at Capitol High School. I moderate and change some opinions tonight about who are Democrats, and that not all Democrats are against right to work. Some Democrats prefer to be a member of the silent majority, and they will register their opinion in that final poll in 2.5 weeks. And I think you'll be surprised. There was a time that unions were necessary as an affirmative action portion of the workplace, perhaps in the 1930s, when our workplace was still perhaps in the 18th century, when a great deal of the workers could not read or write, articulately understand the positions of employment in the workplace. That's no longer the case. Most of our workers are service people, information people, and they are indeed very well educated, and they can think, they can act, and they can deal for themselves. We're 14 years away from the 21st century, and now is not the time for restoring an archaic 18th century situation in the workplace. Now is not the time for socialism, collectivism, or unionism. Now is the time for individualism. At a time when America's productivity has reached new lows and other labor management systems throughout the world are working very well, it's time for a change. A time for a partnership between workers and management, a new partnership with compensation based upon a sharing of the fruits of productivity. A new spirit of entrepreneurship with the only guarantee, not that of a union contract, not that of a union wage, but that of enterprise, freedom, and productivity. It's time to look at the 21st century, a new spirit of cooperation in the workplace between the workers and the people in management, the people who own the business, and the people who produce its fruits. I'm proud to be here tonight. We have several fascinating and honored guests. Tom Gary, who's the president of the Idaho Farm Bureau Federation, had some problem in getting here this evening from Burley. We'd like to thank Mr. Gary and also the Idaho Farm Bureau for endorsing Right to Work. Our next guest is from Pocatello, the Vice President of the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Railroad Union, AFL-CIO, Mr. Rick Matthews.
This is a little bit like grandma and apple pie. I really believe that the Right to Work will do two things. One of two things. It will either strengthen the unions or they'll go out of business. I believe that my personal belief is that we do need unions. A union that will honor those memberships that is paying their wages. Union leadership that will have the courage to stand up when the time comes and discipline one of their people for not doing that needs to be done on the job. We need leadership in the unions that is willing to negotiate honest contracts with their membership and the places of business that those memberships are working at. I believe the time is now that we need to pass the Right to Work so that we don't have another Bunker Hill. I really don't believe that I'm the only union member here. I believe that we as union people need a vision of the future and not of the past. It's time that we start working with our membership to try to get them to be more productive so that we as members and workers in the work field will have a place to work so that my 17-year-old boy won't have to go to Utah to find work. He'll be able to find it here and be with his family. I dread the day that he does have to go to Utah if this doesn't pass, and that I have to start making trips to see my grandchildren someday. As I've said before, I believe it's time that we as union leadership bring back local control so that the memberships of those unions can tell us what they want, so that our memberships are not left without jobs, without homes, and nowhere to go. We don't want to have to send our people and train them here for other jobs in another area. I want to thank everybody for being here, and I appreciate being here. It's an honor. At first I wasn't sure how I was going to speak 2 minutes, and then the more I thought about it, I thought, well, where I work, I keep some people down there captive for a long time and never give them a chance. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Rick. Our next speaker was scheduled to be Tony Hodges. Tony had a problem being here this evening. Tony, we'd like to thank Tony Hodges for his support and endorsement of Right to Work. He is a member of the Boise State University Bronco basketball team. You might remember him from his playing days. He's now employed by the U.S. Postal Service. From 1984 through 85, he was president of the Boise Local American Postal Workers Union, AFL-CIO. And the man is courageous. He truly is a hero of freedom. He's withstood a lot of pressure and coercion and intimidation. And I think we owe him a very, very strong thank you. Our next speaker was a 12-year member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, AFL-CIO. In 1977, he marched on the state capitol against Right to Work. He's obviously had a change of heart because he says nothing can justify taking away an individual's freedom to choose. The co-chairman of the Idaho Freedom to Work Committee, I'm pleased to announce Mr. Terry McKnight.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I am honored to be here with you, to be considered a freedom fighter as these gentlemen that you have heard previously and will yet hear this evening. As a member of the AFL-CIO for 12 years, I blindly fought against right to work and freedom of choice because I believed the lies that my union officials told me. I have since seen the truth. I know the truth. And with you, ladies and gentlemen, with your efforts, the efforts of you getting out and encouraging your neighbors to get out to vote yes on referendum 1 on November 4th, the truth will prevail. I believe wholeheartedly in what we are doing. I want a place for my family to grow, to learn, to graduate from schools that will be good quality schools because the money will be there to fund their education, supply for them the needs that they need. And as they do graduate, they will then be able to find and seek the employment that they want without being forced to join or pay dues to a union as a condition of that employment. And that's what this issue is all about. Ladies and gentlemen, on November 4th, as I stated, the truth will prevail. With your effort, with the efforts such as these individuals that are here addressing you this evening, we will prevail. We will win. And then we will have the right that the Constitution guarantees us of being able to seek and gain employment without being forced to join or pay dues to a union. We will have that freedom of choice that is so richly ours. Keep up the good work. Let's keep fighting for truth and justice. Let's keep fighting for jobs and freedom. Let's keep fighting for freedom of choice, the right that has been taken from us. Again, thank you. It is my privilege to be here with you this evening. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Our next speaker is a resident of Idaho Falls, but formerly of Kellogg, Idaho, where he worked as a miner at the Bunker Hill Mine and was a member of the United Steelworkers of America, AFL-CIO. For an eyewitness report of what really happened at Bunker Hill, please welcome Mr. Justin Talcott.
Hello. I've come here to ask all Idahoans to please vote yes for the right to work. I worked at Bunker Hill and was one of 2,000 men laid off when it closed its doors. I believe that Dwayne Hagedorn and his associates offered us an agreement we could live with and that may have preserved the majority of our jobs in the area. Bunker Hill workers generally agreed with me on this, as was evidenced by their votes: 695 for, 506 against acceptance of his proposal. But a handful of union officials, including the steelworkers from Pittsburgh, refused to sign these agreements, thus sabotaging our efforts to save our jobs and our community. In the past few weeks, some have said prices of metals shut us down, but I know that the union officials and work rules played a key role. The arrogance shown by them is only possible because of compulsory union membership, which the right to work will outlaw. If union officials know their membership can quit paying dues anytime they wish, they will begin to serve their membership instead of dictate to them. Many of our ancestors came from countries where people were forced to join and taxed to support state churches. No such church has the vitality and support that our American churches, whose support is entirely voluntary, have. When unions, too, are supported only by those who wish to do so, I believe their benefits to the working man will far surpass what we see today. They will no longer harbor criminals as their presiding officers. please join me, a former worker at Bunker Hill, in voting yes for freedom, yes for more jobs, yes for Referendum 1. Thank you.
With his wife Eva and their 2 children. From 1979 to 1985, he was a student in Krakow, Poland, where he organized the anti-communist Independent Students Organization, the youth movement of Poland's Solidarity Labor Union. He went into hiding after the declaration of martial law while organizing the distribution of anti-communist literature. He was arrested in February 1982 and imprisoned until August 1982. After his release, he remained active with the Solidarity Underground and organized both the Committee for Defense of Human Rights and the Freedom and Peace Movement in Poland. On November 3rd, 1980, you might recall he appeared in Newsweek magazine at the side of Solidarity Hero of Freedom, Lech Wałęsa. Former National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski said of the speaker in a letter, "It is thanks to people like you that Sovietism and communism have suffered in Poland one of their most important defeats. It is thanks to people like you that Sovietism and communism have suffered in Poland one of their most important defeats." Ladies and gentlemen, one of Idaho's newest residents and a true hero of freedom, Mr. Wojciech Medelski.
Thank you. To be over here, to join this meeting, to speak against labor union, especially against AFL-CIO, all of this is very hard for me. Independent labor movement, Solidarity, was most important part of my life. All my best friends in Poland are working for underground Solidarity. American labor unions, especially AFL-CIO, was and is helping Solidarity very much. It is very important help, and I would like to say to them, thank you. Thank you very much. But I would like to say to them something more. They must realize that no help can give them right to use Solidarity, to use Mr. Wałęsa as tools in their political game. I have been in the United States only 1 year. I think it's a very short time. I have no experience in American life, in American problems. I am not sure who is lying about wages, about employment, but I know very well who is lying about Poland, about opinions of Polish people. I know very well who is lying about freedom. And I can say you with full responsibility that 90% of Polish people, almost all activists of underground Solidarity, probably Mr. Wałęsa, would support right to work law. You can ask why I am so sure. Answer for this question is very simple. Communist government always has forced Polish people to join labor unions. It did not work in the past. It does not work now, and it will not work in the future. In Polish history, since Second World War, only one labor union, Solidarity, was successful. And again the question, why? And again, very simple answer. Because Solidarity was and is fighting for freedom. Now, in Poland, the communist labor unions is the only one which can exist. They can give people much more money, much better working conditions. But, you know, only 10% of Polish workers are members of this union. I know that in Idaho is different situation. Labor union would not like to capture your whole freedom. They would like to buy only part of all your freedom. Maybe very small part, maybe not too important. And maybe they will pay very well. But I think you should ask yourself, what will be if in future somebody will like to buy something more? I mean, more your freedom. And what if he will pay much more? Are you going to sell your freedom? Is your freedom for sale? If not, vote yes in referendum 1. Thank you.
Our next guest joins us from California for his 4th visit to Idaho since June to support our right-to-work law. Mr. Don Galloway is a member of 3 actors' unions and starred in TV's Ironside as Sergeant Ed Brown, also in movies like The Big Chill, and currently stars as Dr. Buzz Stryker on TV's General Hospital.
Hey, Richard, what are you doing up? Why didn't you come in?
I'm honored and pleased to introduce to you the President, or the Chief Executive Officer of BGB Productions of Hollywood, Mr. Don Galloway.
Thank you all for being here tonight. I write all my notes on the back of old General Hospital scripts. As he said, this is my 4th visit here. I hope I'll have many more visits here because I love this state of yours, and I look forward very much to visiting it when it is firmly entrenched as a right-to-work state. My real function here tonight is to introduce someone else, someone I think you'll enjoy meeting. It's a privilege for me to be able to introduce him. He's been in show business for 42 years. He's done 75 motion pictures and a couple of thousand TV shows, including a series called The Texan. You may know him now as Judson Tyler on the daytime show Capital. He has been in his life a logger, a miner, a fisherman, a crane operator, a forest firefighter, and he's been a cowboy. He has also pumped gas, he has driven dump trucks, and he's a former boxing champion. And tonight, he is here as an American, Mr. Rory Calhoun.
Thank you. My goodness sakes. Well, as you can see, I've squinted into too many sunsets. I want you to know that I'm not here in the capacity of a union breaker this evening. I'm here to assist you in your fight for freedom of choice, and I want to thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for inviting me. Now, I made a few notes here. I won't take very long. But freedom of choice is something that's guaranteed to all of us, and I know you've heard that 1,000 times, but it's always well to remember it. And it seems to me that someone here in Idaho is trying to rob you of that choice. And if you don't have a freedom of choice, where does the part that says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness come in? And what we have here, as I've understood, is a union that's throwing a truckload of money at the state of Idaho. And where does that money come from? It comes from the dues of the membership, money that is not being spent at the negotiating table for better wages or conditions. Now let me be fair. In the beginning, the unions did a lot of good for almost everyone. They took us out of the sweatshop era, and they allowed a man and woman to make a decent living for themselves and their families. But somewhere along the line, that goodness vanished. And so what we have now is that the unions have become power brokers. Then, hand in glove with that, they became misery merchants. And let me explain what I mean by that. They have a war chest full of all kinds of vandalism. They have slashed tires, smashed windshields, setting fires at places, intimidation, scare tactics, threats of violence, and even murder. In other words, the kind of stuff that the Kremlin has used in the past. And I'm here because I would fight for any freedom that we have in this great land of ours. Whether it's the freedom of speech, freedom of choice, freedom to assemble, all of these things that you don't have in other countries. But the Kremlin, their record speaks for themselves, and I'm sure I don't have to remind you of that. I mean, there's East Germany and the Berlin Wall, there's Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, now Afghanistan, Central America. But I will remind you of this. These countries have no freedom of choice. So how can we allow someone to rob us of our freedom of choice or buy it out from under us? As I look back over my personal voting record, I have to admit freely that I've often voted a split ticket. That too is my freedom of choice. Now, unions like to guarantee a block vote by its membership. Well, don't count me in on that unless I agree. And I'll tell you something else. It's rare when I vote for a union-backed candidate. Not that they're bad, but because that tells me that someone has someone in someone's hip pocket. You know, freedom of choice is vulnerable. It's very, very vulnerable, especially when someone throws a ton of money at it. And that seems to be the case right here in Idaho. Now, in union land, only a few people at the top have it good, and the rest of us pay for it. I mean, they rent presidential suites and luxury hotels. They have bodyguards and limousines. They have swinging parties. And well, wait a minute. I'm not really against swinging parties. But I will say this, that if I'm going to pay the freight or help pay the freight, then by God, don't leave my name off the guest list. I can promise you, a whole lot of states are watching what happens in Idaho this election. And I can also promise you that you damn sure don't stand alone. When Idaho makes it a right-to-work state in this coming election, that will make it 21 states in this union who have told the union to go to hell. And I can promise you this too. That other states are going to follow. Look, we're a free people. We're not a concentration camp. We have a freedom of choice. This is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And nobody's going to take that away from us. So in closing, I just want to say to you that if we, the people, elect someone into office, we want to know that that person is working for us, not for somebody else. So let's get on with the freedom of choice, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Thank you for your attention.
Our next speaker, campaigning also for the fourth time in our state since June, member of 3 unions, a leader in Actors Working For an Actors Guild, which is a conservative actors organization. He's appeared in many movies: Patton, Norma Ray, The Blade Runner, many John Wayne movies. It gives me distinct pleasure and an honor to introduce to you the president of BGP Productions, Mr. Morgan Paul.
Heroes of Freedom. When I heard this rally was called Heroes of Freedom, I was just looking around in dictionaries and everywhere trying to find out a definition of hero, and I think I found one. Leslie Virginia Johnson came up with it. Leslie, are you back there?
Hero, a man of great courage and ability.
Nobility.
Nobility.
Anyway, you people are the heroes. You're remarkable. You've done a spectacular job against the big union machine. In this, my 4th visit to Idaho since June, I'm grateful to have seen your beautiful state from Boise to Coeur d'Alene to Pocatello, McCall, and more. And I'm privileged to have been a small part of your effort. I'm also privileged to introduce Charlton Heston to you. He is, for us in Hollywood, a constant inspiration and a steadfast example of how to protect and enhance the freedoms we enjoy in our great republic. Of the roles he has played, such as Moses in the Ten Commandments, Judah in Ben-Hur, John the Baptist in The Greatest Story Ever Told, Chuck once said, quote, "They've been a great antidote for the corrosive effects of being a so-called celebrity. When you're playing Moses, you go to your hotel and try to part the water in the bathtub. When it doesn't work, you feel pretty humble." Chuck also said, "We don't live in the time of the hero anymore. We tend to distrust the extraordinary man." Well, it is now my pleasure to introduce you to one extraordinary man I trust and you can trust, Charlton Heston.
After an introduction as classy as that, I don't wonder you stood up. Mind you, I'm in favor of introductions. Often publicly known people are introduced with a sentence or two that says, "Now someone who needs no introduction." In my experience, you can always use an introduction. Now you laugh, I have a story that proves it. When one of those pictures, Ben-Hur, was in release, a friend of mine, Kirk Douglas, had an experience that demonstrates what I'm talking about. Kirk was walking down the street near his home, and he was stopped very politely by a passerby who said, "Excuse me, sir, I don't like to interfere in the private lives of public people, but I cannot let this opportunity pass to tell you what a moving, deeply creative performance you gave in Ben-Hur." And Kirk said, "Well, that wasn't me, that was another fellow." And the man stood back amazed and said, "Well, if you aren't Burt Lancaster, who the hell are you?" So I'm glad that Morgan and the film clips established my identity clearly. A few weeks ago, Gary Glenn called me up and he said to me, "What are your feelings about free speech?" I said, "They're very strong." I said, "Free speech is one of the most important things we have in this country." He said, "I'm glad to hear that. I want you to come up to Idaho and give one." But I tell you, I'm glad to give a free speech on this because this issue is about free speech. It's about free choice. And I'm also glad to speak not against unions, but as a union man. I belonged to 3 unions most of my life. I served as president of one of them, and I helped found a 4th. I'm very proud of that. I'm not very proud of the AFL-CIO's preemption of union members' free political choice. I don't think Samuel Gompers, who is the patron saint and founding father of the labor movement of this country, would be either. A while ago, a few weeks ago, I wrote a letter to the labor editor of the LA Times, pointing out that Samuel Gompers had said, "No gain can come from compulsion to compel a man to join a union." That was Samuel Gompers. The newspaper man didn't believe it, but it's true. That was, in fact, the last public statement Samuel Gompers made on the day he died. It's inscribed in the base of his statue in Washington. My grandfather was from that generation. He mined coal in England before they had a union there, when he was 10 years old. He came to this country. He never joined the union here because he stopped mining coal. He figured that wasn't a very good way to earn a living. But he always supported the mine workers union. He was a friend of Samuel Gompers. He understood Samuel Gompers' feeling about the freedom of choice of a union man. I'll tell you something else Samuel Gompers said. In 1918, he made a speech to the Council on Foreign Relations, and he said, "There may be, here and there, a worker who, for reasons unexplainable to us, does not join a union. This is his right. No matter how wrong we think it, it is his legal right. No one can or dare question his exercise of that right." That's what Referendum 1 is all about. In challenging that, which they do, the AFL-CIO is going up against the fellow that thought them up, that was the driving force behind the union movement in this country. But they do challenge that. They have a very different feeling of what a union member's rights are, and they don't think much of it. For a generation now, the AFL-CIO has been fiercely opposing right-to-work laws that are now in the books in some 20 states, including, I'm happy to observe, Idaho. In recent years, Louisiana, Wyoming, as well as Idaho have passed right-to-work laws, while referendums to repeal them in Arkansas, Nevada, and Arizona have failed. All the candidates for both parties in Tennessee, candidates for governor, all candidates have gone on record in recent weeks saying they would veto any legislative attempt to overturn the law, the right-to-work law in Tennessee. So far back as 1965, Lyndon Johnson, when he was president, backed by Democratic majorities in both houses of the Congress, tried to deny the states the right to pass right-to-work laws. He failed. For the past 13 years, the largest and the most expensive effort ever mounted by big labor, the entire AFL-CIO plus 12 international unions, has been winding through the federal court system. Their effort was to attempt to force the Right-to-Work Committee, the National Right-to-Work Organization, to provide the names of union members who had contributed money. Just this past June, their effort was denied finally. You see, the big labor agenda is not the same as the union agenda, the union man and woman's agenda. They are really no longer concerned to function on behalf of their members, as has been demonstrated in this state recently by the Bunker Hill mine about which you heard earlier this evening. They're not concerned with the big labor is not concerned with the rights of the working man and the working woman. Their concern is to organize what is in effect a political party with the same agenda as the labor parties that have wreaked such havoc when they've held power in the governments of most of the countries in Europe. They have wrecked the economy, they have shaken the government. That is the agenda of big labor in this country. I say big labor instead of unions because I, as a union man, think it's a different agenda. And to see that the agenda of big labor has, as a bad idea, doesn't make you anti-union. I'll put my union record up against anybody's. I've sat in the committees, I chaired the meetings, I arm wrestled in the negotiations, I walked the picket line. Most of my union activities have been on behalf of the Screen Actors Guild. Let me tell you about them. Screen Actors Guild does not consist of rich actors. They got maybe 100 people that make a lot of money. They have 60,000 members, 76% of whom, that's 3/4 of the membership, last year made less than $2,500. That is a very poor union. We are the most underemployed union in organized labor. We are important to big labor only because we have 50 or 60 people whose names you would recognize. And big labor wants to use those. When I was president, I used to get trundled up to the convention every year to have a photo opportunity with George Meany. The longer this went on, the more I realized that we, as a tiny, poor union, were being used. Right now, our president, Patty Duke, whom I respect, she's doing her best to mend the split in our union. She has also been instructed by our union, which is their right, they passed this in a board meeting, to go around the country speaking against right-to-work laws in every state where they exist. I have no objection to that. I'm speaking for it here, that's fine. So is Rory, we get to do that in this country. What I object to is the fact that the Screen Actors Guild is paying for it, not the AFL-CIO, the Screen Actors Guild. And I think it's too bad that the dues of actors who have to struggle, work as bag boys in a grocery market or in a car wash to earn their dues to stay in the Screen Actors Guild, have those dues spent on an agenda of that kind. I think it's wrong, I think it's unfair, and I oppose it. Wojciech Modelsky told you what can happen when a labor movement becomes a tyranny, becomes an arm of government, as it had in Poland. You heard him talk about that. I don't need to add to what he says. The desperation of big labor, the AFL-CIO, at the growing force of the right-to-work movement in this country perhaps accounts for the energy and effort they've devoted to overturn Idaho's right-to-work law here this November. Though I have to go on record in this state as saying I don't think that excuses Jim Kern, who is the president of the state AFL-CIO in this country, threatening death to the legislators who voted to pass it when it passed. Apparently the AFL-CIO is comfortable with that kind of a president. I notice he's still president. Even in a time when union membership has shrunk to 17% of the American workforce, the AFL-CIO has access to $3.5 billion, that's with a B, not an M, $3.5 billion a year of compulsory dues from union members in all the unions in the blanket organization of the AFL-CIO. By the way, the Screen Actors Guild contributes $250,000 a year to that, and I told you what a tiny, poor union we are. We're going to have to put up our dues pretty soon. The AFL-CIO, as I think you all know, has stated that they are prepared to commit, quote, whatever it takes, close quote, to overturn Idaho's right-to-work law. Now, with financial resources like that, I doubt they'll have to resort to President Kern's offer to kill people who disagree with him. But I still hope the Idaho voters will reject them. I don't think it'll be good for the workers in Idaho. I don't think it'll be good for the country. I don't think it'll be good for democracy. As a matter of fact, I would like to personally declare tonight the independence of the union man and woman from big labor.